Sorry. Okay. All right. Welcome back to the Blue Ox Running Podcast. It is spicy number 15. I don't know why I said spicy, but it is episode number 15. We're coming at you in a new year, but Alicia, before we get started, you know the drill. What is your word of the day or word of the year? Or what's your word right now that can describe what's going on in your life?
Let's throw out there icy.
Icy. It is January when we're recording this. It might be February when we release it. It's super cold out. We'll get to that. We'll get to how that relates to our running routines, our yearly outlook. But before we do all that fun stuff, here's the theme music. So what's your spring running goal?
Qualify for the Boston Marathon.
Claim the beer mile title.
Training for a triathlon. 20 minutes again under a 5K.
The run happy.
Balance running and family.
Finish Grandma's marathon.
To not die.
Fast.
Or slow.
Let's go! Fast or slow! Let's go! Fast or slow! Let's
go! All right, we're back from the theme music. And to give you an idea of what's coming on this podcast episode, number 15, we are going to look at all things winter running yearly outlook. We're going to kind of break down how we approach a new calendar year because it is a new calendar year. And we had a lot of people ask questions about how we structure training, not just us personally, but how you might structure training and outlook on a whole new year when you have goals, or maybe you don't have goals. Maybe you have, physical fitness and mental stability as kind of your priority with getting out there and moving and grooving, or maybe you are signed up for races in the spring, summer, fall. We want to touch on all things winter running and kind of feeling like we're in the off season. So your word of the day was icy. That obviously is happening outside in Wisconsin. If you don't know who we are and just stumbled upon a podcast, we are a specialty run store in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. It is how many degrees outside right now? Alicia, do you even know? Put your phone on and get us that data ASAP, or maybe Alex can.
I think it was -7, but feels like -15.
There you go.
Around there.
That's correct.
We're starting to hit like a no kidding. I don't know. Are they still saying polar vortex?
No.
That was a big buzzword a couple of years ago, right? It's just cold out. It's cold. That's what we call this. We call it cold. So when it comes to running, are you running in this crazy weather or no?
For sure. And the terrain has been a little challenging. I went out on a long run on Friday, and it was actually snowing out. And man, I did not wear a trail shoe or like yak tracks, anything on my shoes. I just had my road shoes on, and my hamstrings were feeling it from the slipping after that run.
Okay, so that's kind of what we want to get into. There's actually kind of a different feel. It's not just temperature and the clothes you put on. I mean, clothes and gear are a huge part of that. You could do a whole podcast just on how you dress for different temperatures. That's not really what we're going to talk about today, although, of course, come in the store, call us, text us, email us. We will talk gear all day long when it comes to these temperatures. But when it comes to the actual running, like you just said, your gait, your hamstrings, your hip flexors feel a little different, especially when you're out on that ice. So does someone need to have trail shoes? Do they need to have yak tracks, or can they do this in their road shoes?
For sure, I think you can do it in your road shoes, but for that day, it was light snowing. You can find roads that are clear, but for where we went, and we were going 15 plus miles, it was hard not to hit that. So part of me, for that specific run, I wish I would have had something on.
Yeah, a lot of times it's I get burned by maybe not having the right shoes on if I just don't prepare in kind of finding out where I'm going for that day. So if I know I'm going to go a little bit longer and I kind of know my route, I sometimes will drive it the day before just to see how the roads are. Or I can just safely rely on, we have a winter loop in Eau Claire that is usually pretty clear. Even the day after a snowstorm, it'll be pretty clear where I can use my road shoes. But I get into trouble when I go off and I just kind of spontaneously do a loop that I'm thinking about doing or I haven't done for a while. And then all of a sudden I don't realize, oh, this does go through a lot of neighborhoods that haven't been plowed well. Oh, this does hit this, this county road that hasn't been plowed well, or I have to be on the shoulder more than I thought. And I do use a lot of trail shoes in the winter when I know I'm going there. But there's a lot of runs that I just use my road shoes for.
I think the tricky thing is too, when you need those gear, is like it was actually snowing during the run, so there's no way around it. And I guess I just didn't predict that. Like it wasn't really anticipated in the forecast, and that's where it got tricky because there's no way around snow not being on the ground when it's actively snowing.
And we had a lot of rain and ice actually in December. Maybe that was January too. I forget, but I feel like we have all these layers. Like when I look at our driveway that hasn't been shoveled the best this year. If it cakes up and it like gets a start on bad caking, for lack of a better term, it's like still all under there. There's some roads and neighborhoods that have that ice, and then it gets covered with snow. And like the worst situation in my mind with slipping is when you have that lightly covered dry snow just covering up black ice or something. Alex, how have your runs been going? This is the guy that runs every single road in Eau Claire, so we can actually always ask Alex, how is my neighborhood this week? You just text Alex on Instagram or Strava, and you can get a up to the minute race report or a road report.
Road report, yeah. You definitely are correct that we got a lot of wet snow early on that then ended up freezing,
right?
And then more snow that was just kind of compacted down, and the side roads are looking, they've been better.
Yeah.
And I was doing kind of a fun little like spelling out some words over at Randall Park.
Yep.
So I was kind of in like the student housing area.
You're running, and his map afterwards with his GPS spells out words. It's cool. It's not just Alex like doodling in the snow on a random afternoon, right?
No, it's fun. It's fun when you kind of when you use an online platform where people are kind of seeing. It's fun to send out messages and kind of have fun with. They call it Strava art, But yeah, that was actually my first winter fall of the year. It was on an it was kind of like a weird, like rainy, snowy morning.
Yep.
And just took a spill. And I mean, those roads, they're looking rough. The main roads are great.
Yep.
And you mentioned the winter loop. I think that is a total blessing for Eau Claire because it's very reliable. It's nice, kind of consistent distance, and definitely something that you can get out on regardless of the conditions.
Well, and for me anyway, time of day matters in all this because I can hit the main veins. Like I can run down the middle of Hamilton. I can run down State Street even and not use the sidewalk, even though I don't suggest it. But if you're running at 5 a.m, that's different than running at 2 p.m. when it comes to running on a main road that's nice and plowed. Whereas, if you're running kind of in the middle of the day, you might be regulated to the sidewalks, even though it's lighter out. So there's always a give and take whenever you're running. There's a give and take with the weather. But this actually does affect not just gear. Like we could talk about gear all day, but it affects how we structure our training. You're going to be slower. Alicia, what are you training for right now, and kind of how are you outlooking all of 2023?
Yeah, I typically don't take the whole year at a time. I usually do a training block, even if that's like 20 weeks. This one's a little shorter. I think I started training at 16 or 14.
14 weeks out?
Yes.
16 weeks
out.
Yep.
So I'm training for Boston right now, which is mid-April. But within that, when I'm making my training block, I will look high level and maybe say like if I don't hit the time or goal I want at Boston, I could jump in a half in July, or like I am looking high level, but specifically I'm looking at a specific block.
Yeah. So you kind of don't care right now or are even thinking about fall.
No.
As far as like an event you would do.
Correct.
We know you probably work out, you like to run, but that's not even on your radar. Whereas I know a lot of people kind of have their yearly A races, their B races, like they kind of have the whole year structured, even if they're not totally registered. Whereas you're kind of taking it kind of 2 to 3 months, like a block at a time.
Yeah. And some of that's just like schedule and kids that I can't like plan out that far in advance. And I race a lot less than some people, which is great if you do multiple races. I'm someone that kind of does like 1 or 2 big races a year.
Yep.
So that's the difference there too.
And you wouldn't mind me sharing, so every time that you do a marathon, I feel like, and you've done 2 now, and you're about to do your 3rd, every time you're like, by the end of training, because training is, in my opinion, the hard part. The race is the fun part. By the end, you're like, man, after this, I'm just gonna get in the weight room. I'm just gonna lift and do non-running stuff. Like, do you feel that? Maybe it's too early to feel that already, but
no, I totally feel that. I'm like in the height of my training right now, and I'm like, this is the last one.
Yep.
And especially because I did Twin Cities in the fall, I knew just for me, because like I don't do a lot of races, that this was going to be hard for me to jump into. But like I qualified for Boston last year, so I knew I was going to do it this spring. So like I knew that was going to be a lot of marathons for me.
Yeah. And for those of you that don't know us, like Alicia really hasn't raced since college as much or as frequently as some other people might think. And we're really making this special. I mean, she qualified for Boston on her first time out. We're bringing the whole family out. She's turning 40. Like this is a big deal, I feel like, to go to the Boston Marathon. We found out that Kipchoge's running. We found out that Des Linden's running. Sarah Hall's running. A lot of big names that we're excited to kind of make it not like a vacation, but like kind of a destination race,
a vacation.
Yeah.
We are.
And Alicia's like the last person to do kind of that destination race. You just don't care to travel and race that much. So we're super excited to do that for one of your races. That's usually my races that we're like traveling more for.
Or I think I would eventually, but like I said, the season we're in with kids and amount of time we have, maybe that will come later.
Yeah. So, the winter relates to that. You're kind of naturally slowed down. We're not doing a ton of speed work right now. That doesn't mean you can't have a structured workout, but what I typically will do in the winter is build a lot of slower base miles and just accept the fact that I'm going to be running slower. Maybe we'll get to this later, but even how we track our mileage and stuff, I don't really run on miles, I run on minutes. So for me, when it's really icy out or it's really cold out, or in the summer when it's really humid out and it's 100 degrees out, it's more mentally, it's less mentally taxing to think about my pace and to more just think about, okay, today on the schedule, I have 60 easy minutes, and whether I'm going slower because the ice is there or I'm not, doesn't really matter.
I was going to share, because we're still talking high level.
Yep.
My phases actually in my plan are, and I'm just going to go over this really quick because we don't have time to get into all the details. I start with a build phase where I'm just slowly building my mileage or minutes, whatever you want to call it. And then I add in some base and power where I'm actually not building as much. I'm at my high mileage point, but like adding in some workouts. And then I get into more marathon specific and then my taper. And we'll get into those more details later. But just if people want to know how to break things down, that's where I'm kind of at my phases.
Yeah, and one last thing I'll say about winter relating to that, which is totally different, because I'm the same way. I do a base phase or a building phase in the kind of off season, so to speak. So if I'm getting ready for spring goals, I'll be doing that building and base and slower running in the winter, which is different than if I'm getting ready for something in fall. I'm doing that all in the summer, right, when the roads are dry, but it's hotter. So give me an example of a kind of a workout that you might sprinkle in the winter, even though the roads might still be icy. I know we talked about this at the group run. Mm-hmm. One thing you still can do for quality is find a dry spot, hopefully for what?
One of my favorite workouts, I mean, even in the summer when it's hot too, but specifically in the winter, is a fartlek, which maybe not everyone knows that term, but it's basically really simply where you don't have to like even go off mileage, or you're just doing a pickup for 3 minutes and just go on effort. Like it doesn't have to be a certain time, but just quality hard for 3 minutes. And then you do 3 minutes off, and then you can do whatever you want. Then you want to do a 1 minute pickup and then 1 minute off of
Or you
rest.
still might be running and jogging in between.
Yes, but it's all consistent running. So that's one of my favorites to do, that is just clear roads. And then I don't know if you're thinking more hills.
Yeah.
I think especially for doing Boston, which I know is a hilly course, even little quick sprints up a hill or if you want to go to a longer hill. I know in the last couple of months we recorded one of my workouts on a long gradual hill, but like even today I'm going to just do some quick bursts up like Carson Park Hill.
Literally like 10 seconds all out, and then you kind of come back down and do maybe 8 or 10 of those.
And I do like them usually to be continual running unless I'm like going to a track. So like what I'm going to do, I need to get like 8 miles in today. I literally do like a 3 to 4 mile warm up easy run just to get to Carson Park.
Right.
And then I'm not really stopping. I'm just doing those and then I'm running back and I'm getting 7 to 8 miles in.
Yep. And one thing that we want to do a better job of on our website and maybe part of this podcast, but through our social media and our Facebook group especially, is to give people examples of specific workouts that can be helpful around the Eau Claire area. So it's not just like writing a plan like, hey, let's go do, 5 by 1,000 meters. Well, you can do that at a track, but we find doing them at different places around the city, different hill lengths, different fartlek areas, different mile repeat areas, is for me, it's mentally engaging because I'm not just at a track by myself. And it also keeps us on our toes with not being tied to our GPS watch, not being tied to a certain pace, depending on what build phase you're in, what the weather's doing this week as opposed to last week. But it gets you in tune with what your body needs, even if the time on the watch isn't exactly how it was, 3 months ago when the weather was totally different. So stay tuned to the social media, stay tuned to especially that Facebook group, and we'll be sharing more workout ideas. But with that, let's move into a little bit more of how you would structure kind of in, not just in the winter, but like you talk about a harder day, like what are your easy days? Like how are you kind of structuring a week within this big yearly plan? Like you got to break up the year into kind of months and training blocks, but then you got to break that training block into different weeks, right? And then how does a week go? Like what are you doing week to week? How many workouts are you doing? Like 4 workouts a week? What does the word workout even mean? How many long runs? Like it can get really confusing.
Right. I think the easiest way to put it, and I know some people do more than this, but let's keep it simple for 7 days.
Yep.
And I'll go over the best day is rest day.
Oh, hashtag best day,
rest day. So I always structure in a rest day. I think there's only been a handful of times where like I am up quite a bit on mileage where I'm not taking a full day off. So that's one day. I have one really quality workout day, and then I have my long run.
Yep.
So that's 3 of the days, and then the other 3 are just like easy days, and sometimes I'll add in like some strides at the end of one of those days.
But easy, slower running.
Totally.
You're getting your miles.
I'm not
in.
even going off pace, or I'm like actually purposely running slow, which winter naturally slows you down. And I am trying to, which I'm not great at it. One of the days I tried to add in some like dynamic strength stuff.
Cool. Yeah. Alex, is that similar to what you're doing? I know that. So we're bringing kind of a conversation here with not like totally different principles, but different maybe even perspectives on how we might structure a week. So what Alicia just outlined doesn't mean that that's like the best way to do it. Mm-hmm. Some people are actually really uncomfortable about like structured, so to speak, training. Or even counting miles or counting minutes. But then, of course, you don't want to just get carried away and run, way too much, be overtrained, undertrained. But what do you kind of view as your weekly breakdown? Are you that structured? Are you thinking about 7 days? Or are you just kind of getting out there and running all the streets, baby?
Well, I definitely think that there's a need for balance with structure. I certainly benefit from like kind of knowing what my week is going to look like. Definitely love rest day, best day. Monday, the day we're shooting this, is actually my rest day, so that's always
That's my workout day.
Yeah. So the whole concept. I was kind of introduced to this a couple years ago of 80-20. Running 80% of your, whether it's a week or a month or just a whole training cycle, running that portion of it really easy. And I use a heart rate monitor to kind of really dial in what easy is for me. And I've just found like kind of when that sort of took off, that was just a big game changer because you're really kind of making yourself slow down to get within that range that you're going for, if that's 120 BPM or, wherever your heart rate is when it feels easy. And then having, 20% or, maybe it's 30%, however the breakdown is, but, of quality work where I typically do what I consider quality work of like one kind of speedier interval based or track workout throughout the week. And then I do my long run where I can kind of play around if I want to maybe put some faster miles in the middle of that. But very recovery based, very, kind of tuned into my own longevity. Because I think, injury can just be the bug that kind of comes back when you least expect it, and that will ground you quick. So definitely want to make sure to just be super tuned into the body. And what you had mentioned about dynamic strengthening and conditioning, I definitely
say what they are called. What do you do?
I developed my own calisthenics routine that I call Alexthenics. And
his name is Alex.
The reason
he does calisthenics.
The reason for this being what it is that it's so ridiculous. It's such a ridiculous term, but it includes activities that I'm going to enjoy. I think that has always been sort of the struggle.
So he skips around.
Yeah. So it honestly started in the beginning of the pandemic, and it was like 20 minutes, and it was like 2 or 3 times a week. But it's built up, and I feel that I've gotten stronger and I've gotten more durable, and I think that is a game changer, certainly for me.
Right.
I wanted to add in when he talked, like when both of us are talking about we have this long run or we have this workout, and he talks about recovery. So it's like super important that like you're not doing your long run and then like the day before is your workout. That's when we talk about recovery. Like I'm thinking about like, okay, if my long run's on Friday, I have to have a workout on like Monday or Tuesday because I have to have time to let my legs recover in there.
Yeah, that's good. So when I think of a week, it's similar to what you guys have been saying, where you have that one quality, maybe speedier day. I mean, in a base phase, I might not even have a structured workout, but I would maybe sacrifice quality for more quantity. I would have kind of a higher volume day or a higher speedy day, something that's going to stress your body more midweek, and then I'd have a longer run. And usually that's on the weekend, but whatever works for your schedule. Like Alicia does her long run on Friday because that works for our family. It works for her schedule. And when you just kind of lay out, I know some people actually do a 10-day training cycle, but that really screws up, what days are on weekends, which naturally correspond to some people's work schedule. So you have to find out what works for you. And you can't put all your quality hard days, whether they're hard in quantity or hard in quality, together. You got to space them out for sure. And I'm kind of the same way. I kind of have this Tuesday quality day, and then Saturday is my main volume day where I'm going to go for a lot longer run. And then Thursday, like there's kind of a day in the middle there. I might do something just called SOS, something of substance. It's maybe not totally projected out or written down as a official workout, but if I feel good and I've recovered from Tuesday, by the time I get to Thursday, I might just cut down the last couple miles of that run to make it a little bit more of a progression run. And that's kind of like, I'm kind of playing that one by ear, so I might kind of squeeze in a little bit of substance on Thursday. Also, depending on your event that you're running, like if I'm getting ready for an ultra marathon, I won't do anything crazy on Thursday. I would actually do a longer or a harder day on Friday and then have my long run on Saturday on tired legs. So I kind of, fudge a little bit by having 2 days in a row because the nature of my goal is to run long on tired legs. But I would never do that if I'm getting ready for a 10K or a half marathon. That's just not the nature of that goal. So you can get really in the weeds on this stuff, but for all practical purposes, 1, maybe 2 quality days a week, and then a long run somewhere else.
I wanted to add into like, if this all seems like a lot for you and you're just like running to run your first marathon, like there's so much to play around with. Like you can stay in just that build base phase if this is your first marathon and just gradually build up your long run and you complete it. And
Totally.
That's great. Like we are getting into more specified training with workouts, and there's such a range and goodness in it all, just to clarify.
Totally. And you know what? I would err on that side. For people that are newer to the sport, that don't want to get injured, Alex's 80-20 rule is really good. There's a whole book about that. And in fact, I think that I read an article written by, I forget who, but it was basically talking about that same subject. And it was saying, like, what do the elite competitive faster runners do that other people might not do? And it was touching on this. They actually run a lot slower than you think on their slow days, and they probably run a lot faster than you think on their fast days. And really knowing what purpose that day has for you, because where a lot of people get into trouble is they get excited about running and they get excited about their goal and they get excited about feeling more fit, and they just, all of their runs just kind of creep into this medium fast vanilla, not quite a workout but not quite an easy day, like middle ground. And that's actually really damaging, because then you're doing all of your runs too fast technically, and you're not really getting the quality of a quality day, and you're not really getting the rest of an easy day. So just make sure you know, am I supposed to go kind of slower, or am I actually targeting today as a quality day?
Like my workout marathon pace, like my long run is like 2 minutes per mile slower than like my marathon training pace. So like just to keep perspective, like if you're running a certain amount all the time, like there is for sure variety.
There's a lot of variety. And one resource I'll just point you to, if you go to our website, blueoxrunning.com, I think it's blueoxrunning.com/training. I could be wrong on that, but there's a link that says about, and there's a training page that we have on our website, and it's got a link to a really good calculator. It's called the Macmillan calculator. You can put in, if you've run a race time recently, or you kind of know how fit you are, or you have a goal race, you can put in your time, you can put in your age, and it essentially gives you some different paces. So you're not just shooting in the dark with what's helpful for just an easy pace, what's helpful for a threshold day, what's helpful for those interval workouts. And it gives you, what's really nice, it gives you a range. So you don't have to feel like you have to hit this exact pace. It kind of gives you a range because, again, the weather might be different. You might be at altitude. You might have a humid day. You might be off because your personal life is crazy right now. So that's a good balance thing. And if anyone hears one thing from this podcast, I would say most of your running, that 80% of your easy running should be at conversational pace. That's how I usually say it. If you talk about 3 paces, I talk about the easy pace should be conversational. You should be able to carry on a conversation. If someone asks you a question that you're interested about, you should be able to give a long answer, not a one-word answer because you're huffing and puffing. It should be really easy. All right. Did we kick that dead horse? Dead or what? We're talking about laying out our year, laying out our week, and what we wanted to kind of finish up with is how do we actually track all this? It's super overwhelming to just think of like, yeah, I'm going to go for a run, but then like, how does it fit into that week? How does it fit into the month? How does it fit into the training block? And then your bigger goals for the year without actually keeping track of what are you doing? We see a lot of injuries come in the beginning of spring, or I should just say when the weather gets nice, because people are maybe not aware of how little or what they're actually doing now with more cross training. And by the way, I love cross training. I was injured for this whole last year and a half, and I do 4 days of running now with cross training in the middle there. But sometimes we see people do a lot of cross training in the winter and not as much running. And then all of a sudden the weather's nice and they're running like 6 or 7 days a week. And if you look at the data, they just like tripled their mileage on their feet. And that's where injury can come in. So when we talk about tracking our training and putting it down, whether it's in a book or a spreadsheet or Strava or Garmin or whatever, there's 100 different ways you can look at what you're doing. How do each of you guys kind of do it? I know that there's no perfect way, but are you kind of like going off of your Garmin? Are you just like looking at it later in an app? Are you a spreadsheet person like me? What are you doing, Alicia?
Excuse me. I have my overall big picture that sometimes I do on my own. Sometimes Adam even helps me with, that's like in an Excel spreadsheet. And I'm not good with Excel, so that's why he's helping me with that.
I got to a point where I could print them out and you could like write, because you like to journal.
Yeah, so I do that for like high level, but then on the daily, I just have a little notebook and I write like 8 easy, long run, how much. And then I have been trying to add in like, because I don't use my Garmin, I don't upload anything. I literally wear my Garmin watch and hit start, and then like I delete it or just like let it delete on its own. And so like I have been trying to track in like shoes a little bit better with mileage, because even though we own a running store, like I'm really bad with like knowing how many miles. Because
I'm like, Alicia, what are you doing?
Yes.
You have the opportunity to have new shoes. Trust me. And
yes.
she's like,
so
I'm fine with these. They're dead. Your shoes are dead.
And then I wanted to briefly touch on like being a woman. I have been trying to be better with like adding in my cycle, and because that really affects my week as far as like how I'm feeling, or like even if like my hip hurts, or like I'm trying to keep track of like if I have a little thing that's bothering me, or that I can look back and be like, oh, maybe that's why. Or
Yep. Alex, how do you do it?
It's interesting because I definitely started really up until the last couple years. I was all about just the handwritten notebook. I had my training log. I would kind of structure it out week by week and kind of go. I would write down, the mileage, the time, kind of average pace, and if there was any kind of details about a workout or anything. I did kind of start, managing heart rate, and then I would do just like a little brief kind of synopsis about just how I felt. And so I was actually pretty hands-off with any kind of digital form of training log. Certainly make something as public as Strava was definitely, I kept it at arm's length because I feel that training is very personal. It wasn't until I guess kind of the beginning of 2021 when, I went out for a run right at midnight. It was right at like the beginning of the new year, and it was this whole experience. And I remember sitting down afterwards and just kind of writing about it, and then just kind of pressed post and posted a picture from that moment. And I found a lot of meaning in being able to kind of document that experience and kind of just go back to where that headspace was. And I've certainly gone back and referenced these older efforts over time, and I think kind of as you do it a little more consistently, it really builds up where you can go back and see, a year ago, where was I at, where was my head at the time. And I think the whole kind of connection element where you are kind of being vulnerable and opening up to more people, I've come to find a lot of meaning in that. I certainly don't think it's for everyone. Certainly if you have you feel, because training is very personal. It's, certainly don't get me wrong. I don't think that making something so public is necessary, but I think it's a good humbling thing. I noticed, I don't have a collegiate background. I certainly have never run any elite times. And so I think I maybe have a little bit of an advantage there, because there is a lot of comparison that can go on.
Like any social platform, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
But I think once I got over that, and actually kind of doing the whole kind of 80-20 idea for a while, where I'm posting runs, or I'm running 10-minute pace. I'm running slower than I can, but making that public and then kind of creating a dialogue around that has been huge. It's really it's just kind of changed everything that I kind of initially thought running was, where I was very solitary, kind of all on my own, and just learning how it can foster community and it's amazing when other people find meaning in that and share that with you.
Totally.
That's been pretty cool, for sure.
Yeah, and Alex has an awesome Strava account where he kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of use it as a little bit of a public journal.
For sure.
And Alex uses Strava way more than Facebook. And some people are vice versa, and Instagram. There's all these different ways we can connect with people, and this is a good way to kind of gather people that have similar interests, just in the fact that they're logging miles and you're logging miles, and you can see someone's like kayak route. It's not all just like people posting their track workout and seeing how fast they did their intervals and their race GPS file and things like that.
It's a very positive outlet too. I've kind of run
just the culture of it.
Yeah. Yep. A lot of people. I mean, just people supporting people. You get to kind of see different. It's great when you just see the whole range of from elite runners that you can legitimately follow, like Molly Seidel and who was it?
Des Linden's on there.
Yep.
I mean, tons.
There's a lot.
Jim Walmsley, like all from that range all the way down to just your casual like walker, and there's meaning in all of those activities.
Yep.
And so the positivity of that platform, I find a lot of meaning in.
That's super helpful. I'm on Strava, and my stuff kind of gets pushed over there, but it's all private until I kind of choose to share certain workouts or maybe a race file or something. And I approach it a little bit differently because I'm different. It's not really because there's a right or wrong way, but like Alex said, I resonate a little bit more with like when we had Emma and Connor working at the store. They were like competing as collegiate athletes too, and they were kind of getting away from Strava in the day-to-day mix because it feels like if you're training with intention to run fast or to compete, and then you see your competitors on there, and you see it's hard not to compare. Sometimes you see them crush a week when you're supposed to be resting. And then you're crushing a week when they're supposed to be resting. And sometimes I felt like I was like on my easy runs. And if I'm just like having that public feed of everything out there, like I'm confident that this needs to be an easy run. But like people are kind of like always, I feel like people were watching me run the whole time. And I'm just like, this is such a personal thing that I do that I don't really want people to kind of like be part of it all the time.
Right. And with like any social media platform, like
you can use it for good
or
you can just get into that head. I was kind of psyching myself out,
right?
And so anyway, like there's a lot of different I do think it is helpful to document somewhere. And it's totally up to you if you want to like make that public and connect with people or make it private, but it's really easy to think of your training as one way when actually the data shows that no, you actually did run twice as much in this month as the previous month, or a little nagging injury. Even if something isn't crippling you and your stride isn't changing and you don't feel like injured, so to speak, if your right Achilles tendon just says hello, it just says like a little, hey, I'm right here, I'm a little bit sore 3 days in a row, you're going to want to document that, whether it's digital or in your written journal. And so you can look back and start to see things creep in before they're actual showstoppers. That's a really huge benefit of looking back as well.
I was just going to share, we like only touched on like handwritten and kind of like a social platform, but I think the majority of people too, just like if you have a Garmin, you upload it to Garmin and that's all on there for you to track as well.
So we actually did an Instagram poll, and let me bring it up here. The results of like how you track your training. We've just put that out there. How do you log your training? ? And the biggest one, 49%, said online platforms, Strava, Garmin, etc. So a lot of that is convenience because it just like my watch finds my phone when I get back on the same Wi-Fi network or Bluetooth or whatever it does, and it just uploads it. So you kind of have the data there. The next most popular was handwritten, notebook or calendar. And then that was 29%. 16% of the people said spreadsheet or Excel. Love you people out there. You're my fam, my brothers and sisters on Excel. And then 6% said structured training log, something that maybe has like an actual notebook cut out for like where you put your mileage in, where you journal, where you diary about that specific thing.
Well, and it's so funny, like you said, like we were just on vacation and like I didn't bring my training log. So like I'm sitting there being like, what did I do Monday?
Yeah, what did I do?
Yeah, and like that's the benefit of it, just like uploading somewhere for sure. The
last thing I'll say about structuring these weeks and getting too married to the numbers is it can be this mental exercise, and I'm speaking from experience the wrong way, where I'm actually not making smart training decisions because of the way the numbers might look. For example, life will always get in the way of something, right? And actually this week I had to move my long run from Saturday to Sunday because we had family in town. We were hosting 18 people in our house, blah, blah, blah. Like Sunday was the day and Saturday wasn't the day. But I've had that happen before where I thought I was going to run a really long run on Sunday, but it actually had to get pushed to Monday. And again, that's only a 1-day difference, and it was the same shift. But if you look at those weekly mileages, if you think about putting a 23-mile run on this week, and then it all of a sudden isn't on that week, and it's on the next week, my weekly mileage numbers looked totally skewed. But it really wasn't skewed. It was just the matter of one day going on one day, one run going on one day to the next. But you just have to keep that in mind. Like, that didn't screw up my training. It didn't mess me up, but the numbers looked weird, and you cannot be a slave to your numbers. Like, you have to let the numbers be tools and the GPS be tools and all these training logs be tools for you to still be in control of what's best for your body, Yeah,
another example is just we were on vacation and I'm supposed to go on an easy 4-mile run, literally to get my mileage of where I want it to be. And that's hard for me. I want to get that in and be, especially it's the last day of the week, to be I'm going to hit my mileage. And we were hiking all day.
Right.
And we came home, we were going to sit by the hot tub and have a drink. And it just wasn't the right timing anymore.
Well,
and I was on my feet all day.
You were on your feet for 6 to 7 hours, but that's not in your training log the same way that a 4-mile run
and my
would
legs
be.
are probably more
Exactly.
tired. I was doing elevation. And so it's just okay, I'm not going to run today, and that's okay.
Right.
But I get it. It's hard. I'm still kind of upset about that day that I'm I didn't hit my mileage, but to be flexible with it.
Well, I think I've said it on here before, but my very first marathon, I was conservative in my training, and my mileage was decent, but not great, and I did really well. And my second marathon, I trained harder, and my training log looked so much better, but I ran worse. There's just more. There's just more than your training log numbers. There's life, and there's actually adapting to good rest if you protect your rest. And I think we've talked about that quite a bit. Thank you all for entertaining us on our own training logs. It's a good time, at the beginning of the year to kind of reset and have a plan.
Yeah, and come in anytime, even with trail shoes, the
Totally.
Yak Tracks, or your training plan, Garmin. We're all here to help you on the journey for sure.
I'm bringing up our final thing here on the iPad because we do ask for question and answer. You can kind of tell we don't have a specific guest on the podcast today. We're going to have podcasts where we definitely have guests and learn about people's stories, but we're also going to be putting out more content where we can just share and kind of dive into what's relevant, maybe in the Eau Claire area or your calendar with training. And as we get to different milestones throughout the year, we want to just talk shop, right? So this is what we're in the shop and we're talking shop. Okay. 4 and 5. I've got 2 different responses here. We had a couple questions come through. I'll ask this to you guys. Hydration is something I struggle with during winter months, whether it's because it's cold and I don't really think about being thirsty or the water freezes on longer days. Any tips and tricks for that? And a similar situation for nutrition, like gels and waffles on super cold days. Sometimes they freeze, sometimes they don't. What is cold weather friendly hydration and nutrition?
I'll touch on it just real quick. The waffles, what she said, they can even freeze. So if I have my gels, I try to keep them on my body, but I will fully admit they even froze on my body on my last long run. So a good tip is to, let's say you need to take it at 6 miles. I'm taking them out a mile or 2 early and starting to heat them up in my hands. And sometimes I run with hand warmers, even to stick them in your gloves.
Yep.
And then it is really tricky with the water, which you do need. It's just as important in the winter. So a lot of times we think of insulated bottles only for hot months to keep cold water, but there's a purpose for them in winter too.
Yep. Insulated bottles. I'll also mix my gels into my water bottle so the water doesn't freeze. I know some different maple syrups, it has a totally different freezing temperature. So that mixture won't freeze at 32 degrees like water will. I'll do that. And honestly, on the really cold days, like today's negative whatever with all this wind chill, if I had to go out for a couple hours, I would probably loop back by my house. And I would drink water, and I might grab another stash of gels just because those last few gels might be really frozen. The one that,
Alex shared going.
Yeah, definitely preemptive fueling. Taking in nutrition earlier before that freezing point kind of comes. I'll put my credit card just in my pack somewhere and plan a stop at a gas station. I actually had a pretty scary incident a couple winters ago where I went out for a long run and knew it was going to freeze, water was going to freeze immediately, so I didn't bring anything and wound up having a kind of scary incident when I got back when I was done, and the body was just kind of in shock, having not taken in anything. Had some really severe cramping, and so important to take in nutrition, hydration in the winter, and to have a plan for that for sure.
Yeah, and that whole week before, it takes days to dehydrate and it takes days to hydrate fully.
And on a day like this where it's this cold, this is where being flexible, maybe you push it to a different day your long run because it is very bitterly cold today.
Yep. Cool. Great question. We got one more and then we will shove off here. It says, given the cold weather and conditions, can you get the same amount of quality from going out for a shorter amount of time because the conditions make it more challenging? Example, you have a 60-minute run scheduled, but you can do 45 minutes instead since your effort feels harder.
That's a good question. Everyone leans different on these questions. I would probably still go the hour, but slow down. So you're still getting your hour effort in, but don't worry so much about the time of it.
Yeah, I would tend to agree where I wouldn't want to change the purpose of that day. Before we talked about having your easy days be easy and your quality days be quality. I wouldn't change a 60-minute easy day into a 40 to 45-minute quality day with higher intensity just because of the weather. I would keep the same intensity that you're supposed to do in your plan, and I would keep the same number of minutes. And in fact, it sounds kind of weird, but once I get all my stupid clothes on and it's kind of annoying to get out the door in the winter, I kind of want to stay out there because I don't want to get dressed for 40 minutes and then go for a 20-minute run. I want to get dressed for 20 minutes and then go for an hour and 40-minute run because I'm out there and the second half of the run is more enjoyable. It's the first part that I'm still warming up, and I find myself, as long as my effort is appropriate, just kind of wanting to stay out there if I'm dressed appropriately. But of course, the windy days are the worst. So yeah, I would keep the intensity and the minutes the same, to be honest, but just dress for it. Anything else, everybody? I think we're going to shove off here. Go ahead and go to the website, blueox.run/podcast. You can obviously get all these episodes, but you can also ask a question. There's a button there that says ask question and answer, and we will take anything you want. Other than that, fast or slow? Let's go.
Fast.